Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the June Coffee Talk for the Pinellas LP. We are very fortunate to have a friend of mine that I met at several Libertarian national conventions. Also had a chance to hang out with him at Freedom Fest in 2016, and the co-founder of Muslims for Liberty, who's going to talk about their organization and how they fit into the libertarian movement. I'd like to welcome Hesham el-Meligy.
Thank you very much, Brett. I appreciate the kind invitation and looking forward to an interactive session. So I know the drill now. We told me to speak for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll take question and answer. So I'm looking forward to your questions. Prepare them from now. Write them down if you're going to forget, because I want those thoughts that pop into your mind. So let's start. Muslims for Liberty was established more or less in 2012. We are not registered, we're not incorporated, we're just a loosely affiliated group of people who identify with the message of liberty. The founding fathers put in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. So we identify with these things. And we see the parallels between it and our Islamic teachings, if you want to call it Sharia. Of course, that's a scary word for the past 20 years, but once you know, it's basically, the word Sharia means a road, the literal meaning in Arabic, a road to a water source. So, and we know that water is the source of life. So basically a way to life or a way of life. Sharia is not, there is no book of Sharia law. It's not there. It's just the Islamic teachings as taken from the Quran and the example of Prophet Muhammad. And it is equivalent to the halakha law for Jews and some Jews at least, and the canon law, excuse me, for Catholics. So that's in a nutshell how a Muslim should abide by certain rules and guidelines to live their life. In a Muslim society, yes, there are more societal things, but even at the time of Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, when he was the leader of the city of Medina, there were minorities, Jews, Christians, others, and each group had the option of, if like two Jews or two Christians argue on a legal matter, they had the option to use their own legal code, or if they choose so, they can also have the option of the Islamic legal code. So, and this reminds me, by the way, a few years ago in Texas, nonetheless, I discovered it on Fox News, basically by chance, because I used to, there were only a couple of people you can watch in Fox News, Judge Knapp and I forgot who else. But anyway, so Judge Knapp was a guest on the morning show, Fox and Friends, and they were up in arms, not the judge, the hosts, about Sharia law or Sharia court in Texas. And I said, what the heck are they talking about? So it turns out it's the arbitration system that is under the supervision of the US court. So basically, two Muslims argue about something legal. They had the option to have an arbitration done by a Muslim expert in that matter and to be approved by the US judge. You know, so it's still according to the Constitution of the United States, but they were up in arms in Sharia court in Texas. And so, I mean, the judge put them in place, but anyway, so that's, I wanted to get that right off the bat so we can talk more. Muslims for Liberty was co-founded initially by 4 people. Will Cooley, who with Davi Barker started a Facebook page with that name. I did not know that. They started it in, I think, in 2011. In 2012, in the primaries, when Ron Paul was surging, and I think he got in New Hampshire either first or second place. They stole it from him, whatever it is. So I said, you know what, I got to do something from within my community and, you know, bring about the message, because Ron Paul was basically talking about non-aggression, bringing the troops home, stopping wars of aggression, and economic freedom and sound money and all this stuff. And all these things are right there in the Quran and teachings of Prophet Muhammad. So it resonated with me. So I went to GoDaddy and registered Muslims for Liberty, Muslims number 4, liberty.org. And I spoke to my best friend, Rami Osman, who's the 4th co-founder now. He's in Virginia. And I told him about it, and he said, I'm with you. And we were discussing Ron Paul and liberty and all this stuff during the time, especially after 9/11 and the onslaught of attacks from the government and media on what we represent, our culture, our background, our religion, everything was under attack. So we were researching why 9/11 happened and why the reaction to it happened that way. So anyway, we looked into different things, including discovered what is known as the Liberty Movement. And the Ron Paul, despite some disagreements with him, and despite some what could be said about his, you know, more or less shameful positions on certain issues, he's the reason I'm here. So at least I thank him for that. So anyway, and during that call, me and Rami talking after I registered the website, shouldn't we have Googled that name before we registered it? And we did Google it, and we found the Facebook page, and we contacted Davi and Will, and we became overnight a national organization. Davi was in California at the time, Will was in Tennessee, I'm in New York, Rami in Virginia. So that's how Muslims for Liberty came about. So initially, we wanted to focus more, or me particularly wanted to focus more on the economic message, because there's a lot of what I term as Islamic economy or economic system from Islam. And it very much has a lot of parallels with Austrian economics. Free market for sure, but to an extent. Like, for example, yes, there are no tariffs, there are no restrictions on trade and open trade with anybody and all this stuff. But at the same time, the rich religiously is mandated to give out. This is not a government mandate. This is a religious mandate. You abide by it or you don't, and you, in the hereafter, if you believe in God in the hereafter, then you will face your judgment. So if I have an amount of money, after all my expenses, after all my debts, after all my tuitions, everything, I spent all that I need to spend. And then an amount of money at a certain threshold stayed with me for a full year, untapped. Again, this is very important. After all my expenses and debt and everything that I needed to spend on, this amount of money, which is above a certain threshold, stayed with me for a full year. From that extra, 2.5% goes out to 8 or 9 avenues of charity. At a time, in the early Muslim time, the 5th righteous Caliph, Caliph is basically just a name for the leader of the believers, like the Muslim ruled areas, which was within the first 100 years of like the Quran being revealed. That Caliph used to go on tours trying to find a poor person to give charity to, and he couldn't find. Why? Because people were by themselves righteous. They were fulfilling the needs of the poor who like legitimately are unable to, fetch for themselves. So society was helping each other. So here's the major difference between the current corrupted free market. It's not really free market now. and the Islamic economics, because the component is you have an obligation, religious obligation, to take care of the poor and the needy. It's not a government obligation. You see, that's a difference. So basically, the day-to-day life of a Muslim includes religious obligations and semi-religious obligation, because everything in my life, this current life that we're living, is basically attached to, it's like a journey. It's like a pit stop, and the real life is in the hereafter, because that's the eternal one. Again, if you believe in God, if you believe in the hereafter, that's what we believe in. So how long are we going to live in this life? 50, 60, 100? Who's the oldest person living in the past few hundred years? I heard about a lady in Japan, 120 years old. So what is that compared to eternity? Nothing. So everything in this life is for the purpose of pleasing God, as our Christian brothers and sisters say, pleasing the Lord. Okay. By the way, speaking of God, what did Jesus call God? Anybody knows? What language did Jesus speak?
Hebrew?
Nope.
Arabic? Aramaic.
Aramaic.
Aramaic. Good. I'm with an educated group here. So the name of God in Aramaic is Ilah. The name of God in Arabic is Allah. Then one of the names of God in Hebrew is Elohim. Listen to this again. Ilah, Elohim, Allah. Can you see the phonetic similarity? And those three languages are the three Semitic languages: Old Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic. The only one that is still widely used today is Arabic. I mean, in numbers. So the word God, as we call God today, did not exist until, anyone? How many years ago? Not even 1,000 years ago. Why? Because somewhere in Europe, which is now Great Britain, the Saxons invaded somebody invaded someone and messed up their language, and we have English, and then Shakespeare came and completely ruined it for us. So, but anyway, the English language did not exist 1,000 years ago. It started to become known as English, and what we have now in the year 1066, after the Normans invaded the Saxons in what is now England. So in 2066, we're 2021, so there's 40 plus years from now, the English language will be a millennia old. Okay, so Jesus did not call God God. Okay, let's put that aside, because I hear this, I don't know if it's a joke or real, but someone was saying that some people, why don't you call him God as normal people do? Well, nobody called him God at the time of the prophet, so you call him God as they were calling him. So anyway, yeah, so there are other teachings. For example, the 5 daily prayers. I'm sure you heard about Muslims pray 5 times a day. In the prayers, we recite the first chapter of the Quran, which is 7 verses at the beginning. Would it be okay if I just recite that for those who never heard it before? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. So 7 verses. The first verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Second verse, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Third verse, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the most gracious, the most merciful. So you see the first and third verse repeated, the most gracious, the most merciful. Why am I saying this? Because the 5 daily prayers are composed of combined 17 units. In each of those units, you recite this opening chapter called Al-Fatiha, the opening, the opener. And in each time of the 17, you recite the most gracious, the most merciful twice. You see what I mean? So mercy is a major, major, major theme in Islam. Of course, you hear about kill them wherever you find them and all this stuff. We're coming to that. But I'll tell you, well, let's get into it. In chapter 2 of the Quran, and by the way, if you've never read the Quran, it's not a very big book. You can receive a free copy from a local mosque or an organization. You can download PDFs of it, or you can look it up online, like on websites. So the simplest website you can remember is Quran, Quran, wow, WOW.com. And you'll have the Quran. You can have it both in Arabic and English, or in many other languages. You can, from the settings, you can go and look it up. So, chapter 2, verse 191. Starts with what? Kill them wherever you find them. Oh boy. So what about mercy and what's up with, how do you put these two together? Okay. So Quran was revealed and preserved in Arabic. Arabic is the only Quran. Anything else is a translation, meaning someone did an effort to convey the meaning. Okay. By the way, there is translation and there's interpretation. Both actually are translations, but why am I making this difference? Because what we call interpretation, tafsir, is much more in-depth. And if you want to really study to really get the deeper meaning, you need the bigger interpretation. So anyway, so in the Arabic Quran and Muslims, any Muslim anywhere in the world, in order to pray, in order to recite Quran, you recite it in Arabic. If you don't know Arabic, you can read it in English, of course, or any other language. But when you pray, you at least memorize those 7 verses that I mentioned to be able to pray with. So anyway, chapter 2, verse 191. In the Arabic original, which is the one, the verse starts with the word and. Oh boy, we have a problem here in conveying the meanings. There are some good translations or interpretations, and there are some not so good ones. But even in some of the good ones that I myself prefer, this first letter got omitted, and I was really dismayed. Why? Because I remember Bill Maher in the year 2001, when he was still in ABC under the ownership of Disney, and he had this show, it's called Politically Incorrect. It was late night after Ted Koppel, if you remember Ted Koppel. I'm showing my age here. But anyway, so after 9/11, he had a Muslim guest. And I mean, we weren't, to be honest, Muslims at the time were afraid, were being under, pressure, persecuted by government media and this and that. So anyway, so the guy wasn't really prepared, wasn't understanding how the media works and this and that. So what he said is, Islam is peace. So Bill Maher stood up and he was holding a copy of the translation of the Quran. Kill them wherever you find them. What is peace in that? And of course, Bill Maher is either lazy or a hateful bigot, or somewhere in between, like you can go, because simple investigation would reveal that issue, that the verse starts with the word and. So, and kill them wherever you find them. So reasonable people who passed the first grade would understand that there's some context here. So look at the previous verse, verse 190, chapter 2, verse 190. It says what? Fight in the cause of Allah those who fight you. I think we established here that the context is self-defense, but wait for this one. The rest of verse 190 says, and do not transgress, because Allah does not love us those who transgress. And there is your also non-aggression principle in the Quran. So everything in context makes sense if you take the time to actually look into it. I'll end by this because I could, again, speak forever, and I would like to hear what you have to say and engage in a dialogue. Chapter 2 again, verse 255. La ikraha fid din. It starts with those 4 words. La ikraha fi ad-din. It means no compulsion in religion or matters of choice. And that verse became the slogan of Muslims for Liberty. I'll stop here, and I would love to engage with you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I was changing the views so that the recording shows the folks that are here, and we don't have to worry about switching on the speaker view. The first question that I have for you is, Hesham, you shared how you found the ideas of liberty and how you became a part, and you shared what the path that a lot of people do in talking about Ron Paul. What is it that Muslims for Liberty is doing today that is adding value and being a part of the libertarian movement to bring in more people to share the beauty and the philosophy of liberty?
Excellent question. Thank you. And thank you for outing me with the George Bush syndrome. I started saying what I wanted to focus on in the beginning of the founding of the organization, which is the economics, and I forgot to continue. Like George Bush, he starts talking to a topic and then move on with his life when he gets bored. So forgive me for that. So what we unfortunately had to do, because of the attacks on Islam and Muslims and Arabs and Middle Easterns and this and that, I wouldn't say unfortunate. It's still a value that we do, which is educating both Muslims and non-Muslims about the parallels between the liberty and the message of liberty and Islamic teachings or Sharia. So attending the conferences, whether it's the Libertarian Party conferences, or Students for Liberty, or any of those conferences, we usually have a table when we can. By the way, we are, again, not incorporated, not funded by anyone. Anything that we do is from our own pockets. So anyway, we have tables, we distribute material. If we're invited to talk like now, thank you again for the invitation. We share what we can within the time and take question and answer. So it's basically so far education about both Islam and liberty to both Muslims and non-Muslims.
Hey guys, feel free to just unmute. I think Jasmine just did with questions that you may have. Otherwise, you'll just have me asking questions and nobody wants to hear me talk.
I have so my question is pretty much so since like 2012, like how far would you say like you guys have like grown as a movement?
Excellent question, thank you. So we know, of course, within the United States, many others joined us over the years. But we also know that in different countries around the world, people started copying our model, whether it's Egypt, Morocco, Pakistan, Malaysia. So there is a growing number of people joining the movement around the world. Students for Liberty in particular is more successful because, college students have more ability to connect and research and, other than a father, for example, who has to find food and shelter for his family. But definitely it's gaining ground. But also reality check is most of the world is going towards more of a central planning, bureaucratic / autocratic, systems. Even you can see it even here sometimes with some of the people in power in the United States. So we have more room in the United States to grow than anywhere else in the world. And as the forefathers mentioned, the Constitution, with all its faults and initial issues, especially the 3/5 clause and whatnot, it's still the hope for the world. And I, as a Muslim, practicing Muslim, I hope that God accepts me as a practicing one, because I could fool myself. But as a practicing Muslim, I would rather live under the United States Constitution absent Sharia. If you know what Sharia is, you would want to live under Sharia. But absent Sharia, there is no system that is man-made in the world that is better than the United States Constitution if it's applied. Of course, we know how things developed over the years, but like what's on paper is the best system, as also Frederick Douglass acknowledged in his speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July." Thank you for the question, Jasmine.
Marcia, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I've heard of the Nation of Islam. How are they related to the Muslim, whatever? You see what I don't know quite what the connection is.
Thank you, Marcia. I appreciate the question. So the Nation of Islam is an American phenomenon. It was formed as a result or in response to slavery and Jim Crow and the mistreatment of Blacks in the United States. They are not mainstream Muslims, and to a certain extent, I don't want to excommunicate someone. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I know that they are, for example, use both the Bible and the Quran together, which to mainstream Muslims or like Islamic teachings, you cannot do that. Also, some of the problematic positions that they had, at least, I don't know if they changed now today, is that the white man is the devil. That's not how Islam views the race relationships, and that reminds me, actually, I should touch upon that. But let me mention this first. Malcolm X was part of the Nation of Islam. That's how he started. That's how he got his fame. But when he went to Hajj, and he went to Mecca and Medina and Egypt and other places in the Middle East, he wrote a letter, a famous letter. Look this up online, Malcolm X letter from Mecca. And he mentioned that he found Muslims who are white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde hair, treated him as equal, because that's what Islam does. It equalizes between all, and the only difference is, and here's the Islamic teaching portion, there is a hadith from Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, that says, no Arab is better than a non-Arab, and vice versa, and no white is better than a black, and vice versa, except with piety and good deeds. So now, piety is not quantifiable for us humans. Like you cannot quantify the level of piety I have. I cannot quantify the level of piety you have. So it's only up to God to determine that. So we treat each other equally with respect and dignity, and the piety portion, we leave it to God. So no one is higher than another. No one is better than another in this life. Only God will determine that in the hereafter. So that's what made Malcolm X basically leave the Nation of Islam and become a mainstream Muslim from that moment forward. So do they have good things? Sure. but they also have some bad things, and it's particularly this race issue. Like they look at it really bad, which only perpetuates the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. I hope that answers, but well, feel free to follow up.
And I
I
did link
think
that
it
letter
did.
that Hesham noted. I did link that in the chat for anybody who wants to
Oh, wow.
take a look.
Good. Now, just to make sure, am I right that Nation of Islam is headed by Louis Farrakhan?
Yes, that's what
Okay,
I.
good. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. No, thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
I had another question.
Go ahead.
So have you guys done any sort of work to kind of create unity between people that follow the different like sects, like SECTS, like the Sunni, like people that are Sunni or people that identify as Shia?
Right. We have not done that in an active way, but the message itself is automatically unifying. And one of our current main members in the leadership is actually a Shia Muslim. So like, and this thing, okay, so let's touch upon the Sunni Shia thing. It is mainly a political difference. It's not really a religious difference. It was a ruling who gets to rule over the Muslims at the time. And of course, it is unfortunate that that division happened and actual fighting took place. But if you look at it from like deeper, you'll see that it's individual shortcomings and desire to rule that led to this division. But as far as doing work, as I mentioned, we have our day jobs and we do Muslims for Liberty in our spare time if we have any. And it's fully funded from our own pockets. We're not rich by any means. So we are limited in our ability. We welcome sugar daddies, but we're not going to change our message.
No, it totally makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.